Full screen. All right, you ready?
I'm ready.
Your 8 minutes is starting now.
All right. So the problem of evil, a lot of Christians will sit there and say that it's not a problem at all. They try to play it down so much as a defeater for their specific God. But the problem of evil in combination with the problem of divine hiddenness are probably the 1-2 punch that knocks most Christians out of the flock. And I'd have to disagree and say that it's not a problem, or it's a bigger problem than they want to let on, because they've created a whole branch to their theology called theodicies that are designed to deal with this specific problem. So if the problem of evil isn't a problem, then why theodicy, right? Why do they exist? My specific argument for the problem of evil is three-pronged. It's not actually a formal argument, but it's more of a trilemma in the spirit of C.S. Lewis's Liar, Lunatic, or Lord. So B.S. Lewis has his own trilemma. It's going to address God's stance as the moral standard for goodness. It's going to address whether or not there is a dual contrast between evil and good, and it's going to address creation. I think by addressing these three specific points, it puts the Christian into a tailspin in which they are forced to disavow one of these 3 points. And all 3 points are actually backed scripturally too. So they're going to have to be arguing with their Bible. I'm interested with what type of Christianity my opponent's going to portray tonight, because I do know that there's ways to weasel out of this. And I don't discount Howdy that he's going to probably jump on those pretty quickly. But, I'm not going to give away my game. And whether or not he does jump on him or I defeat him, I get him to leave whatever version of Christianity that he's taking on for this debate. I'm sure we can have a spirited discussion, philosophically, logically, morally, about the topic. So, Howdy, if you're ready, I got the syllogism for you. You might want to write it down. I'm going to be hammering this over and over and over. I'm going to give it in the brief form, and then we can unpack each premise during the discussion point to see where you fall on it with your faux belief system for this debate and what possible counters you can come up with them. So premise 1, God is the tri-omnis, omnibenevolent, omniscient, and omnipotent, all-knowing, all-good, all-powerful. Premise 2, evil exists. And premise 3, in a reality before creation of anything, evil did not exist due to his omnibenevolent nature. I don't have much other than that, so I see the rest of my opening time.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the opening. Howdy, you ready for me to start the timer?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You have 8 minutes starting now.
Okay, the problem of evil. Yeah, I'm really interested because I don't understand the syllogism, and I'm interested in the trilemma. I wrote like his stance as the standard, if there's a contrast between evil and good, and about creation. You had mentioned divine hiddenness, but hopefully we can keep it just on this topic. So my stance as a faux Christian or pseudo-Christian, I'm probably going to be scriptural reliant because I think that would be faithful to the debate. So ultimately, to remain consistent with that literature, I'm probably going to have to give the skeptical defense. This is the defense proffered in the story of Job, and Paul seems to endorse some form of skeptical theism, although providing plausible reasons as to why he permits evil when he says, what if God willing to reveal? So he has some sort of revelation account of this sort of stuff. if he wanted to reveal his mercy and reveal his wrath, and like seemingly these characteristics or traits or qualities or positive ontological features of himself, in order to make them known to creation, it's possible, if not plausible, that he would permit whatever we want to define as evil, suffering, etc. Although, because Paul phrases it as a question, he's just saying, well, it could be the case that this is the reason, although he's not giving that as gospel. So yeah, let's talk about the logical problem of evil. So we could talk about, well, what is evil or suffering? Is it about the distribution of suffering, the quantity of suffering, the duration of suffering, the severity of suffering? So like there's some common sense, which I'll grant. I'll grant the common sense argument. The logical problem, obviously, I'll dismantle. But if you have some common sense notion, like you have some non-inferential support for facts about evil that support atheism, okay, fine. Like maybe I share that intuition, and maybe we'll get into that. So like, what's the point of a theodicy? Because that's sort of what I'm going to do, is try to not only throw my hands up, but fight back. So ideally, I'll have to account for the relevant data of evil. I'll have to provide reasons or motivations to believe that the relevant goods outweigh the relevant evils, and that I'll have to provide reasons to believe that evil is required for the obtaining of goods, at least plausibly, and that God has the right to secure these goods via these mechanisms. So, theodicies in the literature, there's a handful. Probably the most popular is the free will theodicy, is that suffering is a byproduct of freedom. This is primarily from Plantinga, Swinburne, and Van Inwagen. But there's also soul-making theodicies, where suffering promotes character building. I think it was first introduced by Irenaeus, but more recently Hick and Doherty have sort of went down these lines. And so plausibly, virtues are valuable. Certainly, if you're a virtue ethicist, you would affirm that. And well, let's talk about the virtues. At least, if not most of them, seem to entail some sort of evil or suffering. So let's think about courage. Well, courage can only be obtained if and only if there's like some sort of danger, or something like forgiveness can be obtained if and only if there's some sort of wrongdoing. Perseverance can be obtained if and only if there's some extended periods of discomfort. And we can run down the gamut of various virtues along those lines, where there's some analysis of them that logically entail the permittance of so-called evils. There's also an intimacy defense that says that suffering promotes intimacy with God or others. Adams, Stump, Erikstrom, and Collins have went down those lines. So, like, let's say something bad happens, you turn to God. That's essential. I don't want to spend a lot of time because I'm on the clock, but something along those lines. Less popular in the Abrahamic tradition, although in the East, you'll see stuff like karmic or rebirth narratives. So instances of suffering could be consequences of past action. I probably won't lean on that too heavily, although I do think there is some biblical support for this sort of thing. There's lots of Jews who affirm rebirth, even in the time of Jesus. There was talk of rebirth. Is like, are you the Baptist? Even though like we just killed the Baptist, or like, are you Elijah? But Elijah, either died or went to heaven like 1,000 years earlier, or Elisha receiving the soul or spirit of Elijah. So I'm not going to lean on that too heavy, but at least it's like possible, maybe not plausible. Another is like the global value, where maybe there's no best possible world, and so God's going to have to just select one of the worlds. and which any world God selects, there's always going to be the argument, well, why didn't God make the better world? Well, the answer to that is that's logically impossible to create a best possible world. But again, my main defense is probably going to be skeptical theism, is that by cognitive limitations, we have an inability to think of a defensible theodicy is not much evidence that there is no defensible theodicy. There's no evidence against hidden divine reasons or evidence for divine reasons. Maybe Vierkstra, Bergman, Alston, Durston, Depot, Rutledge, and Hendricks have sort of pioneered this in the literature. Bergman says something like skepticism concerning the total population of goods and evils and their necessary interrelations and degrees of values we're just sort of spitballing it. So, I mean, like maybe it provides some credence in favor of atheism, but certainly nothing definitive. There's an anomaly defense where apparent gratuitous evils should be treated like anomalies. Anomalies. Sorry. I think this is Pruss. So any particular instance isn't going to refute
30 seconds.
And there's counter evidence and modal and axiological constraints may be greater goods and Taylor permit evil, or the good only has to outweigh, defeat, or compensate for the evil, and that no definite amount of evil is sufficient for God's purposes. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the openings, you two. I'm going to hide myself now. Get started here.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Mega bloodbath engaged.
First of all, I'd like to say I wish I could get Howdy to yell at me. Like, if I do that, I consider that a win. I don't think I've ever heard Howdy raise his voice at all. So, as I alluded to in my intro, Howdy, there's a lot of different types of Christians out there. My stance is that there's as many types of Christianity as there are individual Christians. And also, some of these Christianities, the problem of evil just doesn't apply to. So, I would like to run you through my premises as a quick checklist, see if you qualify, and then we can go back and elaborate on each one, if that's okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you think God is tri-omni?
Maximally. I think he can't do things that are illogical.
Okay. That works. Do you think evil exists?
From our perspective, yes. Although it depends what we mean by that. Like maybe there's no like something that's like in all things considered evil. Maybe that just comes down to a matter of perspective. Although I'll grant that seemingly evils exist. Like I'll say something is right or wrong. Like I'll have moral judgments about actions that I consider bad.
Okay. So yeah, we'll go back and revisit that one. That's usually what everybody gets stuck on is premise 2. Premise 3, do you agree that in a world of God alone, a reality of God alone, that it'd be impossible for evil to exist?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. All right. So the maximally great description, you're saying the only disqualifier you have is if it's logically impossible, right?
Yeah, that's the only one that I'm aware of.
Okay. So I don't think we need to spend much time on there. We're probably going to spend a lot of time here on premise 2. So the way I define evil, according to your opening, you were addressing suffering stuff. Suffering doesn't come into my picture at all. I'm attempting to put full weight on God, what he cares about. Because he is, as described in the first premise, he is the omnibenevolent standard of goodness. Do you tend to believe the objective, the argument for objective morality points to God?
In this debate, I'll probably be agnostic between divine command theory and the first horn of the Euthyphro dilemma, where God abides by my understands independent moral evaluative judgments.
Okay. So yeah, even if we kick the can to his nature, right, it's still him. That is the standard for God, right? It just informs what he says. That's the divine command.
Yeah, I don't know. It's plausible. I don't think the Bible, or maybe it does. So I'm okay taking that horn of it.
Okay. Well, because it would, this is where it gets tricky. It would fall into the logically impossible part of premise 1, because he's all good by nature. He's maximally good by nature, except for logical inconsistencies. And so that means he would be the standard at which we measure all human morality to.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to unpack that. It could be the case that good, or like moral good, is completely independent of God's character or stance or desires or will. It just, because God is omnibenevolent, he would abide by that, if that makes sense.
Okay. So my definition for evil for this debate is anything that's contrary to God's nature or will.
Yeah, I'm actually super happy with that. I'd say contrary to will, maybe.
Yeah, because the way I see it, nature informs will, informs action. Last time I debated this on the hot seat with Jim Bob, he just went in full denied evil existed. He tried to do the deprivation of evil or whatever, the privation of evil thing, saying it has no ontological value, that then ended up conceding later in the debate that it is conceptual and exists in the conceptual realm. So if you were going to go that way, I would still say that in a world of God alone, concepts wouldn't exist either that were made out to the natural world. So he created everything conceptually and materially as well.
Yeah, I'm sympathetic to the ontology of evil being a deprivation, because I think it's Isaiah where he says, I create the light and the darkness, I create evil or good or whatever. And seemingly he's drawing a comparison. And if that's the case, then darkness is just the absence of light. And that gives us some prima facie reasons or plausible motivations to believe that it would be the case that evil is just a deprivation, like a cold or darkness,
A shadow. Yeah, light and shadows are usually the example used, which I would say I agree, because we can see and measure and observe light photons. We know that it's just the blocking of light by an object that causes a shadow. But conceptually, they both exist, because I say shadow, you know what I'm talking about. When you as a Christian, if I'm putting my Christian hat on, we're talking about something evil going on in the world. We both know each other are talking about conceptually, so it exists conceptually.
Yeah, it's a word that has semantic value. Like, it's not unintelligible, but it's just the same as like darkness or cold.
Okay, so let's transfer to the third premise. Do you think that word would have any semantic value in a world of God alone, when he is the omnibenevolent light and there is nothing to cast shadows on?
Like, would God know what that word means? Like, yeah, I think so.
So you think God actually holds the concept of evil in his omnibenevolent mind?
Well, if we're saying that, like, if it's a deprivation and if he's all that there is, there's no deprivation of him anywhere. So it would be the case that there is no evil, and he could probably he probably knows what it would be like to create such that his being isn't maximally everywhere. Like, I would say something like God knew what he was making, and in order to do that, he'd have to understand the ramifications of it. So I guess if that's what you're asking, yeah.
That's true. And a lot of people point to, human beings' free will, you talked about in your opening, are secondary causes. But if they're going to keep leaning heavily, or you, because you're the Christian, and if you guys are going to lean heavily on cosmological arguments about first causes and unmoved movers, that applies to the moral realm as well. And so you can try to push it off the free will and secondary causes like human beings and such, but the second cause is a first cause. So
Yeah, I'm agnostic on that. Like, that's because if you want to throw it into the nature, I'm agnostic as to whether or not things are good because they correspond to God's character, or God's character, or God is good because his character qualities correspond to some stance independent truths about goodness.
So in my attack of this, all I would have to provide is an example of him using his all powerfulness to eliminate that that privation, right? So if we use the light and shadows example, if I said that God made things transparent, but still with form, then we wouldn't have shadows, correct?
I'm not sure. All I can say is that in the actual world, shadows are only created as you described by like bodies blocking like the transmission of photons. I don't know how I mean, maybe like there's plausibly lots of ways God could have created shadows, but I don't have the mind to imagine it.
Glass, crystal clear glass can be a form that lets sunlight through with casting no shadows. So if we transfer that to the moral realm, then it's possible that God could have made us in such a way that we didn't cast shadows.
Oh, you're saying that God could have created a world without evil?
Yes. It's not logically impossible to his, to your definition of the premise one.
Well, it just depends on what we mean by evil, then.
Anything contrary to God's will or nature. That's really the question that's at hand here.
Yeah.
Why would an all good and all powerful God create or have anything in his creation that he didn't want there?
So like creation is good. I'd have to affirm Genesis probably, where he saw everything and saw that it was good.
Mm-hmm.
So like creation qua creation is good. And you're asking why, like, does God have reasons for allowing things to go against his will?
Not allowing because he caused them. He's the first cause and he's omniscient. So it depends if you're going to pull the open theist card here or not, but he knew it was coming.
Yeah, I would probably affirm prescience, although I'm probably agnostic as between causal realism and causal anti-realism. And even if I granted causal realism, it's plausibly the case that from agent causation accounts of libertarian free will that their actions were not caused by him, even in that circumstance.
Okay. So creator is a title that is a relationship dependent word. If he had not created anything, he had no creation, we couldn't call him a creator, right?
Yeah. I'm not going to go actus purus. I think that the biblical depiction of God is that he has potentia, he interacts, he changes. So his nature or character, lots of things about God are immutable, but not everything. So in Ephesians, it'll say something like the church was the purpose for creation or the cosmos or the world. And in order for that to be the case, it must have been the case that the crucifixion was planned. And if the crucifixion was planned, then the fall was planned. And in Revelations, you'll see things like the lamb slain before the foundations of the world. So I would affirm God's prescience. He absolutely knows everything that will come to pass. And in Genesis, I think he says something like, what you have intended for evil, I have intended for good. That's generally the thought that I'm rolling with.
Okay. So you're starting to lean into Calvinism as a defense, because we're getting dangerously close to evil not existing. Remember, the definition of evil is anything that's contrary to God's nature or will. And so if you're going to, like I stated in my opening statement, the trilemma is designed to make somebody drop one of the three premises. There's three different conclusions depending on the premise you drop.
Well, if we were going to stipulate that, I'd probably drop premise 2. If you're saying like there's an all things considered evil, I'd have to reject that. But if you're saying that evil in terms of like temporal or incidental or purposeful sorts of whatever we're cashing evil out as against his will type stuff.
Yeah, I mean anything evil, because within him, in a reality alone, there was no spot, there was no yeast in the bread. By him creating, he actually introduced evil into the world. And so now, if you're going to deny evil, you just gave me the verse earlier in the debate that he created evil. So how would that work out scripturally?
Yeah. Well, it's unclear whether we have to take that as like he's directly causing every single thing to transpire. I think that's reading a little bit too much into it. Certainly, well, in that context, he's talking about his like righteous judgment upon peoples or nations for disobedience. Well, okay, so in that verse, when he says, I create evil, the context of that is like he's raining, essentially, it's like something like raining fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. And in that sense, it's more probably apt to translate it as like suffering rather than against his will, because obviously he intends to rain fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. So it would be a bit incoherent to say that evil would be against his will. So it's sort of like equivocal. So depending on the context, the word evil might carry different semantic meaning.
Yeah, you're going the calamity view. Like, but I want to tell you that any other definition that word's used for evil right there is always translated as evil in other places of the Bible. It's not calamity, because it's such a troublesome verse. Magically, that word gets changed to calamity there, but it's evil every time it shows up otherwise.
Well, I know it's the same word, but again, every non-formal abstract language is going to be polysemous, and the meaning of the word is going to depend is going to have like contextual variance. But certainly in that context, he's referring to his judgment, and his judgment would not be against his will. So if we're defining evil as anything against his will, it would fail in that case.
Yeah. So what is your understanding of God's will? What's his end game according to your version of Christianity?
So on my reading, God is sort of the main character. The story is about him. His will is to accomplish his pleasure, and his pleasure was to create and be in a relationship with creation, ultimately for the glorification of himself and his creation.
Not his creation, just himself.
No, I believe that. No. I believe that creation will be glorified in the eschaton.
Okay, then how would you explain Paul's syllogism of the potter and the clay, and then the clay saying to the potter, "Why have you made me just to destroy me?" And he says, "Just to my pleasure."
Well, he doesn't say just to his pleasure. So again,
well, he says, "Who are you to ask?" Basically, he says, "Shut up, fool."
Yeah, I think Paul is aware of the story of Job, which very straightforwardly would be a skeptical defense. But Paul offers at least a plausible account of the reasons that God would have to do so. So first of all, Paul says things like, who can know the mind of God, sort of thing. But maybe that's a bit poetic, or my ways aren't your ways, stuff like that. But so what Paul says about the potter and the clay is why he made me and then that's a callback to the Psalms and somewhere else where it talks about the same sort of thing. It's that, Paul's interpretation of it is that maybe God willing to reveal himself, his righteousness and his destruction of evil, and his loving kindness and his mercy, permitted clays, some for honor and value and some for dishonor and disvalue, I think is how Paul frames it, although I'd probably have to pull it up and read some commentaries to give an exact answer, but that's my general recollection of it.
Yeah, and it also states that God is love, correct?
Yeah, but it also says your God is an all-consuming fire, and these sort of predicates. maybe it's the is of predication. It could be the is of identity. So that's going to be contextual as well. But I probably wouldn't affirm divine simplicity either. So I think there can be plurality in the divine, such that it could be the case that God is love and also an all-consuming fire and also whatever else the Bible says about him.
How does that square with an all-loving God, though? Like, this is what I don't get. If he loves his creation, then and he wants to be in a relationship with his creation, I don't understand how a loving relationship involves me wanting to destroy someone that I'm in a relationship with.
Well, again, the reasons for that, it could be for revelatory reasons about God and his character. Because, like, let's say you want to get into a relationship with someone and I say hi and you say hi. And then, I mean, that's not really a relationship. Ideally, we'd want to know things about each other. And so Paul says it's possible that God does these things in order to reveal himself to creation.
Yeah, and that's a great answer. You know, like in relationships, sometimes you'll go through what's called the honeymoon stage, and you're in love and everything's wonderful, everything's great, but then you go in and you get to know the person better, and you find out that after more has been revealed that they're Satan. How would I determine that I'm worshiping the good guy and not the bad guy?
I didn't answer you how to tell the difference. Yeah, that's the point. Is like you wouldn't. So here's the thing: if there was no distinction between good and evil, you would not be able to tell the difference between God and Satan, right?
But you were kind of leaning into earlier that evil doesn't exist because there doesn't seem to be anything that's contrary to his will.
Well, it just depends what we mean by evil, right?
What is contrary to his will or nature? Because he's the standard of goodness. He's the objective moral standard that they use in the objective moral arguments.
Okay, but the thing is, like, that's not the only thing that evil means biblically. Like, it's not a technical definition, so it's going to depend on the context what that word is attempting to illustrate. But if the question about evil is about God's will, what was the question?
You liked that definition earlier in the debate. We both came to agreement that it was a good definition because
I just don't think I don't think it's a technical definition. I don't think that's the only thing that word could mean.
No, words mean a lot of different things, but in this sense, since we've already established him by premise one, him being the omnibenevolent God, I think that anything that's contrary to his will would be missing the mark, sin. Essentially, that's why sin is such a concept in the Bible. You're not hitting the mark. You're not hitting the standard of God and his moral goodness.
I would agree with the first and disagree with the second. Obviously, I'm about the and how it's used. It'll say like the archers sinned when they missed it. Yeah, that's sort of a good analogy. I don't think that's exactly what it means. So that word in Koine Greek around that time period, we have we're actually lucky to have a lexicon from around that period where it's defined as like an error in rational judgment. And I think it's more like a failure or a mistake. If I was translating the Bible, I would translate it as either failure or mistake. And you can think about missing the mark of sort of being outside of the bounds. So when you listen to Jews talk about Torah and talk about building fences around the Torah, you can sort of think of it like that if you'd like it's a helpful analogy. But I might push back a little bit. Depends on like what you're gonna use that to springboard off into, you know.
Okay. I'm gonna tangent a little bit. You mind if I read you a verse? Because you already brought up Job earlier in the discussion. And I find this to be a particularly problematic verse for Christianity. It's Job 2:3. And then the Lord said to Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. He is blameless and upright, a man who fears God and shuns evil. And he maintains his integrity, though you incited me against him to ruin him without any reason. So to put this in context, the first chapter, he's already got his house taken away, his kids killed, his servants killed, his animals killed. Everything except for his body has been touched at this point. What I want to focus on right here is, first of all, that Satan has incited God against him, which shows Satan's will using God's power. And the end of that sentence saying, without any reason. So according to God here, this wasn't according to his will. He didn't have any moral justification for allowing this to happen. Isn't that a good example of him creating evil or using it, allowing it permissibly?
Well, if evil is against God's will, there's literally nothing God could do against his own will. But if you mean evil in the sense of, like, again, this is why it depends on what we mean. Like, if you mean evil by like the suffering that occurred to Job, I would, yeah, I mean, I would agree that God sort of initiated the confrontation. So I'm agnostic as to whether or not. I mean, it could even be the case that he willed Satan to not touch him and leave him alone. I don't know.
Yeah, until the second part. Right after this is when Satan says skin for skin. But God says without any reason, which means that he has no moral justification for allowing Satan to do what he did. Because if he had a good reason, then that would make sense, because he has morally good, sufficient reasons. It's according to his will. But here he shows a complete absence of reason, a lack of any moral caring about Job at all. And it's also like points to like whether he was actually testing Job to see if Job would falter or not, which challenges the idea of omniscience in premise 1, but I'm not going to stress that point.
Oh yeah, so okay. So what was your question about Job 2:3? Is that God doesn't have a reason?
Yeah, no morally justifiable reason for letting Satan, or actually God is the one who ruined Satan. It was just according to ruined Job. It was just according to Satan's plan, because other verses say it was the fire of God that came down that killed his animals and his servants.
Yeah.
And it says that the wind knocked over the house, which only God controls the winds and the waves. So it was God that did it.
Yeah. So Satana is, or Shaitan is like more of like an accuser or like a prosecutor in the divine council. There's more than one Satan. There's like anyone's a Satan who's like an accuser, like in Judges. So like there's a Satan that accuses the people, and then God judges them based on that testimony or whatever. I'm not sure exactly how it works, but
agreed. Or is this from the Christian standpoint, though? I know this is the Jewish standpoint, and you're arguing for the Christian God.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
just making sure you're staying in your lane.
My Christianity would affirm the Old Testament as well.
Okay.
So the way I look at this is Job has sort of been brought to trial by Satan. And Job will even say at the end, my Redeemer, write my case down, and I know my Redeemer will redeem me. He's saying like a lawyer, like maybe I'm too stupid to argue my case, but I know that I'm right. Like I haven't done anything wrong, and a good lawyer would redeem me. So I think that's it's more like a legal context, and in that Satan is sort of like the general prosecutor of creation. He goes around pointing his finger at people. He's the accuser, essentially. I think it even says that verbatim in the New Testament. So that's his role in the divine council. And so,
don't you think that becomes a little arbitrary? Because remember, this is God's power that did all this. So God is the one that did this to Job, only to come back and redeem him. It's if it is I broke your leg just to sell you a crutch. It seems pointless.
Well, again, in this context, without cause doesn't mean that God doesn't have a reason for doing what he's doing. He's just saying that Satan, his accusation is baseless, and that from what Satan intends for evil, God's divine judgment on Job, he intends for evil. So at least possible, if not plausible, that God intends it for good. So I don't really see the trouble here.
Well, the question is if like he has the power to actually follow through with the intention. Because I know you're going to affirm like, oh, he's all powerful, but that's within logical reason. And if he's internally inconsistent and contradictory and self-defeating, that doesn't actually give me much confidence to think that he would actually come through and do the redeeming.
Well, here's the thing. There are like tests. There's so there's a lot of imagery in the Bible about stuff like forging, and to forge, like you put it through the fire and burn off impurities, and then like the faith of you is revealed or whatever. So it could be like some virtuous sort of rationale.
Like a greater good. You mentioned bravery in your opening.
Yeah. So it could be, well, I mean, God's doing a lot of things in the story of Job. One, he is rebuking Satan for mischaracterizing Job, and he's also proving to Satan that Job would remain faithful even through enduring trials. And it could be the case that he's also even helping Job by promoting virtues. Or, I mean, there's like 10 different responses that are at least on the table for it. Still.
And I get that. And there's a difference between God lifting his hedge of protection and actually being the one who attacked Job, though. Well, and I can demonstrate through scripture that he actually did the attacking. Not he just let the bandits go free. He sent fire of God himself from heaven to destroy his family.
Yeah. Sometimes when it's, and God will send evil spirits and do a whole bunch of, like, I would affirm that. So like some Christians will say, no, God is just withdrawing his grace, and by withdrawing his grace, bad things happen. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is, at least to me, it doesn't seem like an honest reading of the text. So I'd probably have to affirm that God is actually raining fire on Sodom and Gomorrah. God is actually doing all the things he said to do in Revelations, swallowing people, putting people to the sword, all sorts of stuff. So, but I mean, that's just could be divine judgment.
So let me ask you a question. I guess we're going to get into the philosophical or logical realm here. Can a maximally powerful being do anything that's opposing his maximally good nature?
No, I don't think he's divided. I don't think his will is probably like, you know how some people say people have like a one-track mind? I don't think God would have to, I don't think God has desires in opposition to each other such that he has to evaluate and, you know, choose from conflicting reasons. Probably all of those are like pre-evaluated, and he's, you know, to the point with whatever he does.
So with that, we probably just erased premise 2 then, right?
Again, I mean, it just depends what you mean by evil.
Anything that's contrary to his omnibenevolent nature and will.
Well, his will can create something that has the possibility to go against his will.
I don't know if that's true. Because even a little drop of evil doesn't make him maximally great anymore. So he like the holding to the omni or maximally great standards is actually one of the greatest restrictions that he could have. This is like when people talk about us humans and our natures. Like, you have the free will, but I don't have the free will to fly because it's not in my nature to fly, right? So he should have zero capability in his nature to do evil or produce anything that produces evil, even 2-3 steps out, because he sees the ramification.
So that's a lot to respond to. So again, like the first point is like it certainly doesn't logically follow that God creating something that could go against his will entails that he's losing one of his properties. I gave like the virtue response, the free will. I mean, there's like 20 responses that haven't been addressed, but putting all that aside, you're saying that, well, God is constrained or restricted by his nature. I'm probably agnostic on that. It could be the case that God could, like, I mean, when we say could, it's sort of like ambiguous. Like there's nothing preventing him from.
The could speaks to his omnipotence. The would speaks to his omnibenevolence. And so that's where it gets changed up all the time. Well, yeah, he could, but he wouldn't. And I don't even think that. I think his omnibenevolent nature actually dictates his coulds as well. Like the same way I can't fly because it's not in my nature.
I mean, it's hard to speculate on what God would do or could do. I mean, we can take a crack at it. So you're saying, could you restate your objection again?
Can an omnibenevolent or God, or can an omnipotent God do anything contrary to his benevolent nature?
Oh, you're saying like this is like a logical.
This is a rock and a hard place.
Like he has the ability to, but
you could say he has ability, but doesn't his nature limit his ability, therefore making him not omnipotent? Because there's a lot of things that we as humans can do that God can't do. If that's the case, we can sin, we can do evil, we can go against his will, but he can't go against his will.
Yeah, you can't go against your own will. That's like that's like an oxymoron.
Yes, then he's not all powerful. We've raised the first premise now.
Well,
it's not logically impossible because I can do it. I can do evil. You can do evil. It's not logically impossible.
Yeah, there are things that God can't do. Like God can't win the game where the game is not to think about the game. God can't die. God can't turn himself into a fly, and God can't remove his stuff or whatever. Like he can't deprive himself. But the thing is, but it's unclear whether I would accept deprivations as abilities. Like I don't see why having the power to die is like it could be the case that like deprivations aren't considered in like his omnipotence.
I don't see how. Like it's not logically impossible for me or you to fly. There's no logical impossibility about that. It's just not nomenologically impossible. But for him, in the same way, he can't go against his nature. It's not that evil itself in reality is an impossibility. He just can't do it. He can't do it. That means he's not all powerful. Same way, me and you can't fly. He can't do evil. Nothing logically impossible about that.
Yeah, I just see no reason to ascribe the necessity of deprivations into the definition of omnipotent. And this seems to be sort of off track from the topic being the logical problem of evil. But we can go down this.
We're on premise one. We're saying if premise one needs to be eliminated. Okay. We haven't got to premise 3 yet. But I'll get you on the virtue stuff. So the virtue thing is like you mentioned bravery being say violence or something that is unpleasant is necessary for bravery.
Yeah, but more broadly, it's more agnostic about whether there are necessary relations between evils and goods, such that in order to create goods necessitates the creation of evils logically.
Yeah, and I don't think that is the case because heaven is also a thing that's proposed in the Bible, or a New Jerusalem, perfect and blemish free as described by the bride analogy of the church and stuff. But in order to go with the greater good stuff, the virtue stuff, if God creates violence or something because he wants bravery as a greater good, that bravery is only a potential greater good. But with it comes the potential for a greater evil of cowardice. And that happens with the polar opposites of any greater good virtues you can put out, which makes him even more evil because he's now creating the potential for greater evils along with those greater goods. We could do a mathematic formula, cancel those both out, and we're still left with the original evil, quote unquote, which is unexplained. Because the bravery outweighs the cowardice and the whatever outweighs the other thing that's opposite of it. But we're still left with that original thing that branches out to those two greater evils and goods.
Yeah, so if we're going to the virtue angle, it could be the case that God, in God's prescience and providence, he actualizes the world such that the goods are obtained. Or it could even be the case that even the potentials of the goods outweigh the possibilities of their denials.
Are people going to hell evil?
Well, if by hell you mean Hades, everyone goes to Hades, good or evil. And
Not Sheol, to eternal damnation.
if you're talking to the lake of fire, the lake of fires for people who aren't in the book of life, talks about who gets in there and who doesn't. So you'd have to faith, and I take it that faith is more of like a belief that obtains from a relational trust from testimony. So like someone tells you something and you believe it. I think that's sort of the general usage of that word biblically. And without that, you would not be in the book of life. Therefore, you would get thrown into the lake of fire.
Those names in the book of life have been written down since the foundation of the world, correct?
It doesn't say on that. I'm agnostic to whether maybe it's the case that the names are getting written in and written out, and then, or it could be the case that they're set in stone from the foundations of the world. I don't think it says either way. What we do know is that Moses says something like, "Don't blot me from your books," and even in Revelations it says, "He who overcomes, not his name shall I remove." So it could be the case that could, maybe that's a figure of speech and all the names are in there the whole time, or we could take that literally, in which case the names get added and removed. I'm agnostic on that. I'm not sure how relevant that would be.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, it talks to his character on whether, if he thought all of creation was good or not, because from the foundation of the world talks about before the fall.
Yeah, for sure. So God in his prescience, well, so like his purpose is to accomplish his pleasure, and if we take Paul at his word in Ephesians, the purpose is the church, and so it pleased God to create the church. He wanted to so the metaphor is like he wanted a bride essentially, but it sort of doesn't do it justice. You'd have to dig into what exactly that means. Most people take that sexually, but that's certainly not what's in the literature. But to be fair about the lake of fire stuff, for the purposes of this debate, I would be a universalist, such that the lake of fire is not eternal, and that everyone eventually will return.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to get off on the universalist tangent. We got a little bit of time. I'm going to hammer premise 3. So is there any problem with there being no evil existing before God? Because everything was according to his will before he created anything. This will go against the free will argument, stuff like that.
I don't see how. Maybe you could explicate that, but yeah, there's no evil.
Well, after
creation.
After he created supposedly free will, which created the opportunity for evil, and he knew that they're going to take the apple from the tree, etc. And he knew the fall was happening because Jesus was from the foundation of the world. So can we even call it the fall evil?
Yeah, but well, again, it's like a perspective issue, because again, what in Genesis, like what they have done for evil, I've done for good. So it would be like an all things considered good, but like from the perspective of like the human perspective or the temporal perspective, it would be.
Well, I guess it depends on his purposes. If he designed and created Adam and Eve to die eternally, then yeah, he fulfilled his purpose. If he wanted them to share an eternal life, then it all depends on whether they're saved. That's a different discussion. But if he knew that people were existing that weren't in the book of life, and he created them anyway, those people are existing against his will.
Nothing exists against his will. All of creation is good.
No, it says that his will is for all to be saved, and you're a universalist.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, but that's his will.
Well, that's one of the reasons why.
That's the question. Can his will actually be actualized? Is he omnipotent?
And it will.
You
it
sound
absolutely
pretty confident
will.
of that.
He wills all to come into the truth, and he will do all his pleasure. And even Paul says, "Who can withstand his will?" So he's going to get it done.
So why not just create people in heaven?
Again, I would probably ultimately I'd have to give us the skeptical response given by Job and alluded to by Paul. But Paul's possible theodicy is that it could be the case that in order to reveal himself to creation, he would have to allow for evil to display his righteousness and judgment, as well as his forgiveness and mercy to his creation to enter into that relationship ultimately.
Yeah, but that's not a standard. He just does what he wants, basically. There's no actual moral standard. If he's just going to do what he wants all the time and we don't have access to it, like, we have no moral standard as human beings because he just does what he wants.
I don't understand that objection.
Justice and mercy cannot coexist at the same time. Mercy is the suspension of justice. And so if he created some for mercy and some for justice, he's only partially just and partially merciful. He's not all merciful. He's not all just. And it just depends on his whims, his feelings, his feels on how he woke up on the wrong side of the bed that morning. Like, everybody could be damned. We don't know because he's just pissed off.
Well, thankfully, God's doesn't change his mind, or, well, let me rephrase that. God is true to his word, and we have faith that he will do what he promised, and he's the fulfiller. But in any event, you're saying that there's no standard because God just does what he wants.
Yeah. Because he's as much of a standard as I am.
Oh, so it could be the case, like, I mean, it depends how we cash out those definitions. Like, we would be in another semantics game about what it means to be merciful and what it means to be just. But it could be the case that it's logically impossible to be maximally both. And so I think God's constrained logically.
So that would kind of go against his maximal goodness in premise one, right? Because which one's the good one?
Well, we can't conceive of what's like maximally good. It's sort of beyond our comprehension, but God can.
It feels like you're turning him into a utilitarian calculator. He's in there, he's running numbers, and he's like, well, this is going to work out the best for this situation. This is work out, but he doesn't have any standards himself. So why am I expected to follow his standards as a moral standard of goodness? I can just do utilitarian math on my own.
Yeah, so whether or not God's commands carry like any motivational weight, I think is beside the point. Like, we could argue about like if there are like if moral rationalism is true, where upon being presented with like, let's say, a moral truth or like a true moral evaluation, that would provide you reasons or motivations. I'm probably agnostic on that, although I probably lean towards moral rationalism, is that on reflection, with access to these thoughts, that you would have reason or motivation to do so. Not that they would be overriding, though. Of course, that's not the case. Just because I can tell the world no one do any harm to anyone, that's not going to stop anything. So certainly there's not going to be overriding factors to people's moral internal subjective motivational sets. But
is God's law the communication of moral goodness to humankind? The Torah?
Yeah.
Yeah, is it written on our hearts?
The Torah isn't written on your hearts, although it will be eschatologically when he fulfills his promise by giving the new covenant, according to Ezekiel and Isaiah. But before that time, the Torah does provide moral guidance.
Hasn't the new covenant been given through Jesus Christ?
Um,
You're a Christian.
yeah. I would say that the covenant's been cut and inaugurated, and there's this thing about like there's fulfillment, there's partial fulfillment and fulfillment in parts. So like let's say God promises to give the land of Israel from the Moab to the sea to the descendants of Abraham. It's not like he snaps his fingers and everyone just inhabits it. What happens is it's like progressively fulfilled. So it could be the case that blessings are extended through the second covenant such that the Holy Spirit gives people a taste of the fulfillment of that. But I don't think the covenant is completely fulfilled. Obviously, the law's not written on everyone's hearts as it's described in Isaiah.
The objective moral argument goes that, like, we all know that torturing babies is wrong, right? For fun.
Oh yeah, so Paul will say something about the natural law when they their conscience excuses themselves or condemns themselves when they do by nature the things of the law. If that's what you're referring to, I would affirm that there is some natural inclination towards the moral responsibility.
Yeah. So what happens when God commands Abraham to kill a baby or a kid? Isn't that contradicting, and we're causing a friction between divine command and his moral laws being written on our hearts?
All right, that's time, but we have 6 minutes additional, so I'm adding that on right now. If there's anybody in the audience that wants to extend this, feel free to drop a super chat. $5 gets you a question, $2 gets displayed on the screen. We've got 6 more minutes starting now.
What was the question?
What happens when God's law in our hearts contradicts his divine command?
That's, I think, logically impossible.
No, but don't you find that it's weird, like the contradiction, because it's in your heart from God to not do certain things until he tells you externally to do this thing. Like if he's the standard and he put that in your heart, shouldn't his will always to not do that?
So what I think about Abraham, I just take it. So first of all, God promised that he would have this son and that he would have. So he knows that God promised that his son's like totally fine, and I think that was just like a test of his faith. I think in Abraham, we don't know because the Bible doesn't say. But if I had to speculate on Abraham's like internal mental states, I think that he was thinking that, oh, I just kill my son and he's going to raise him from the dead because he's God and he promised me that he would give me this child. So it was just like more of like a test of faith, whether or not he was he had that relational trust and obviously was not killed.
Shouldn't God already know that?
It's not for him to know. It's for
Abraham to know.
Yeah. So it's hypothetical. We don't know what would have happened. Although presumably it couldn't have happened because it was all planned, but hypothetically, let's just throw everything out the window. Like I would agree that presumably Isaac would prefer not to be stabbed or slain, even if he would be resurrected. Although it could be the case that, again, that would be overridden by greater good. So like wouldn't be like an all things considered evil. Maybe the relationship, even if he did have some animosity towards Abraham after being slain, I think that the overall, if we're going to say it's like some overall value of the world, is at least plausibly increasing in that scenario, even though that scenario never happened and biblically could not happen. That'd probably be my response regardless.
Okay. What's the time, tacos?
3 seconds.
You suck.
I win. No, that was a good debate, Howdy.
Yeah. Sorry I took it on short notice. I wasn't as prepared, but did my
Are you all
best.
conceding the rest of the open discussion?
Oh, how much time is left?
14 seconds.
No, I am going to soak up this time and thank B.S. Lewis for having this conversation with me. It was a blast.
All right. Well, that was a good discussion. Very, very strong bloodbath performance from the both of y'all. We mega bloodbath performance from the both of y'all. We're going into the closing statements now, and there were a couple super chats. I'm not totally overwhelmed with super chats, so I'm just going to read these ones real fast. Oh crap, I didn't start them. So Cody said BS is the best, put Howdy to rest. Professor Hizzle said, is Howdy planning to immanentize the eschaton? And then Cody, gotcha. And y'all have 8 minutes starting now. BS is the affirmative, not starting now, but y'all have you will have 8 minutes when you're ready, BS. Oops, wrong button.
Ready.
Whenever you're ready. All right, you've got 8 minutes for your closing statement starting now.
So I think it's pretty clear what happened here tonight. Howdy was a good Christian. Even if he's LARPing, he was good enough to start getting me frustrated with some of his apologetics at one point. I found myself interrupting a little bit more than I should have and raising my voice. But what's really underlying, if you're listening to what we're talking about, I had him dancing around the three premises. He would basically become Calvinist and deny that evil existed at some point because everything's according to his will. Then we jump to like questioning whether he is omnibenevolent, omniscient, or omnipotent, which is denying the first premise. There's no escape from this trilemma. He didn't spend too much time disputing premise 3 about evil existing before God created everything, except for when it came to the talk about free will. But he wasn't really harping on that too much. I usually save that premise for the people who want to endorse uncaused causes and first mover arguments, but ignore that when it comes to moral arguments. So in that case, I'd say like if God created a tree or a seed, knowing that it would become a tree, he's responsible for the tree. You know, Jesus says a little leaven leaveneth the whole bunch. And so by him making the dough in the first place and putting that tree in the garden, he introduced the drop of leaven that would become the yeast of evil that influenced all of the world. So you could try to blame the bread, but I'm going to sit here and maintain my insistence that the chef is responsible for the meal. What else happened during the debate? I feel like we got a little bit into virtue ethics, talking about greater goods. That's not an escape because greater goods also lead to the possibilities of greater evils. They cancel each other out, leaving the original sin or evil that God, quote unquote, didn't want still there without an answer. I would be interested to talk to Howdy more on his stance of universalism, because if we're going into like a consequentialist, utilitarian type moral framework, there's no avoiding heaven and hell. There's no avoiding the end game. If God really cared about people, he would have just made them in heaven. He would have made them transparent to the shadows. There would be no ability for them to block his light in the first place. He has ways, using his all-powerful nature, if he's all-powerful, to skirt around the privation of good defenses when it comes to evil. I feel like if God is love and he just wants a relationship with us, he's a crappy God who doesn't care about the other person. And in terms of Howdy's moral framework in this debate, it just sounds like might makes right. He becomes an arbitrary God who can just shift with the winds depending on his fees. Oh, I feel like giving this guy justice and I feel like giving this guy mercy. And in fact, it was that way before it was even created. I created Howdy to give him mercy, and I created B.S. Lewis to give him justice. None of that actually points to a standard at all. It just points to total subjective morality, which is what Christians usually hate. This totally destroys the objective argument for morals for God. It just says that because he has the power to enforce it, that he's good by just what he says. My other points is like the Christian who leans heavily onto divine command theory can't tell if they're worshiping Satan. They can't tell if they're falling into the adversary's trap because there's no standard to tell the difference between God and Satan. Satan is just doing what God wants in the first place, right? So he's just doing God's will the same as you're doing God's will and I'm doing God's will. We're all just puppets. And this is why it's so tempting to drop the premise 2 of the argument and just wipe evil completely off the map, because it's such a problem. As I said in my opening, the problem of evil, the problem of divine hiddenness, if wielded correctly, are a 1-2 punch that will knock out any Christian's faith if they're willing to be honest with themselves. As Howdy showed here, he has tons of apologetics. He knows from his past, plus he did some research before we got into this. There's no end to the excuses that they're going to make to weasel out of this logical contradiction that I'm trying to present to you guys here, that I did present to you guys here today. And with that, I concede my time. Nothing else to say.
All right. Thank you for the closing there. Howdy, let me know when you're ready, and I'll start your 8 minutes. Oh, real fast. Also, I did put up a vote, so make sure you guys put in your votes. There's only 9 votes on there so far, and there's 50-something of y'all watching, so make sure to hit that vote button for whoever you think is tonight's master debater. But let me know when you're ready, Howdy.
Yeah, I'll take it from here.
Cool.
So yeah, first I want to thank B.S. Lewis taking this conversation with me on short notice. I think it was cordial. We weren't screaming at each other, over talking, or interrupting each other very much, and so it was very pleasant. I think it was pretty productive. We got a lot on the table for everyone to think about and evaluate for themselves. So I guess my first thoughts is that B.S. Lewis didn't present an argument, like even charitably interpreting his syllogism. It had no inferences or conclusion. So strictly, there wasn't even a logical problem of evil introduced to the conversation. A lot of his closing sort of caught me off guard. Maybe he's misremembering, or hopefully he's not deliberately misrepresenting me. Obviously, I denied Calvinism, what evil means, which I said was the polysemous word, and depending on the context, can mean different things. So, like I already gave like plausible explanations, and like the ultimate reason for allowing acts against his will is for the creation of the ecclesia. He said he refuted the virtue stuff, but I didn't. He's like, it's just assert. I would love to see the argument for that. It just seems like a bare assertion. Like I don't recall anything in support of that. Like God and his prescience could have evaluated the total good and evil as I'm just repeating myself, but it could be the case that he evaluated the total good and evil as a net positive, or it could be the case that even the possibility of good overrides the possibility of the contrary. About justice and mercy being a problem. Well, God has reasons for arbitrating justice and mercy. He's not, at least he's not biblically depicted as arbitrary. He's just posing this as like maybe possibly God could do this, but that's just not the character, at least under any Christian interpretation of God. No arguments were supplied in support of that. He again referenced divine command theory, which I'm agnostic to. But even if I did, I don't see how it follows that you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between God and Satan. He's just asserting that in no arguments. Again, I illustrated the 4 things that I had to do: account for the data, relevant goods outweighing relevant evils, goods as being required for obtaining good, and God having the right to secure those goods via evil, or at least providing possible, if not plausible, accounts as to that. Again, the free will defense. I don't recall any thing against that, suffering or evil or acts against his will, if he wants to frame it that way, could be a byproduct of the freedom to choose freely to enter into a relationship with him under a agent causation, libertarian free will account of that. It could be the case that soul making for the goods of virtues, under which these evils promote character building, in which case there's like logical relations between the virtues and the possibility of denying them, as well as the relevant evils required to actualize or obtain them. There was still the argument from intimacy that the existence of it allows you to turn to God. We didn't really address the karmic rebirth stuff, which I wouldn't really lean on anyways. Again, the global value. And again, like my main one is just the skeptical theist response, which I think is the biblical response according to Job and Paul and Romans, that the inability, even if I had no defeasible theodicy, that's still not much evidence that there is no defensible theodicy. There's no evidence against hidden divine reasons. There's no evidence for divine reasons, and skepticism concerning the total populations of goods or evils or their necessary interrelations or correlations and the degrees of their values are very plausibly just beyond our epistemic limitations. There's also the counter evidence argument, which is that even if I granted that evil is evidence against theism, but it's outweighed by evidence for theism, by their arguments, experience, or testimony, could be modal or axiological constraints that good entails or permit evil, and that good only has to outweigh, defeat, or compensate, under which I'm a universalist, so I got that covered. And there's no definite amount of evil sufficient for God's purposes. Certainly, it's not the case that this is a quote-unquote knockdown argument for Christian theology. It's weird that he also brought up divine hiddenness, which wasn't a topic. He's just sort of like softballing that in there. But again, Wickstraws, Birdman, Alliston, Durson, Depode, Rutledge, Hendricks, Craig, Plantinga, Adams, Stump, Erikstrom, Collins, Irenaeus, Stotry, Swinburne, Van Inwagen. Now, a lot of these are theists, so they do have motivated reasoning and providing theodicies, but there's a irreligious, agnostic, or secular people weighing in on these things. And first of all, there are no knockdown arguments in philosophy, and there is an abundance of literature on the problem, on the logical problem of evil, which again wasn't presented, but I'm sort of doing his work for him. If it was a knockdown argument, certainly there wouldn't be piles of literature for and against it. How much time do I got?
1 minute. I'm sorry, 1 minute, 50 seconds.
2 minutes left. That's sort of all that I wrote down. I guess I can freestyle it. So, again, the main verse scripturally for this is that Romans potter clay analogy by Paul, which is directly referencing Old Testament stuff. There's stuff like the man conceives in his heart, but the Lord directs his steps, sort of thing, or stuff like you've chosen it for evil, I've chosen it for good, sort of thing. I can talk a little bit about that, although I think we've sort of covered that ground. So yeah, ultimately the purpose of creation is for the ecclesia and universal reconciliation, and the good of that outweighs absolutely any evils. I mean, I think that's like what's the word? Self-evident. But in order to create in a Christian paradigm is theistic, and so God wants to interact with his creation. And almost uniquely to Christian, God wants to enter in this like loving, close, personal relationship. And so how could he do that? You can't have a loving relationship with someone you don't know. So God's going to have to reveal himself. So in order to reveal personality or character traits, loving kindness, mercy, justice, power, glory, holiness, all
That's
these
time.
Oh, thanks.
You can go ahead and finish your statement, and then we'll do the vote.
Yeah, plausibly, all those things would absolutely require the sorts of evils that are at stake in this debate.
Thank you for the closings, you two. There's only 17 votes. I guess I'll go ahead and call it there. Y'all had plenty of time to get the votes up. B.S. Lewis was voted tonight's master debater with 65% to Howdy's 35%. So B.S. Lewis, congratulations on